Mike from Evenheat Kiln, and we're here today with Tim Zowada from Tim Zowada Custom Knives in Boyne Falls, Michigan. Today Tim's going to show our salt bath units, going to discuss how to use them, how he uses them. So Tim, what can you tell us about the salt bath units?
Okay, well, first, salt bath units have been gaining in popularity for probably the last 15 or 20 years in the custom knife world. Previous to that, even the Chinese were using molten salt for heat treating steel parts and knives way back into the 1930s. And even molten lead and things like that were used before that.
Really?
So what happened years ago at a knife seminar, a guy suggested, it'd be really cool if somebody came up with a salt system for knife makers.
Right.
And so in conjunction with Evenheat Kiln, back in the 80s, the first salt systems for knife makers were put into commercial operation.
The 1136?
Yep, that's the KF 1136 or the 1118 short version of that.
Right.
And so this is the updated version of that you guys have put together now with better computer controls and things like that, and more of a plug-and-play turnkey system. So that's kind of the development of it. But essentially what it is a regular Evenheat kiln, as you know, because you're the guy that runs the place,
right,
with a stainless steel pot down inside of it with molten salt. And the whole concept is rather than just heating up the blade in a forge or in a regular kiln to prepare it for heat treating, getting it up to what's called its critical temperature or its austenizing temperature, we're doing this in a liquid, which happens to be molten salt.
Right. And
we can talk about the specific types of salt later, but the idea is putting it into a liquid heats it more quickly, more evenly, and protects it from the outside environment. And so you've got a lot more control over what's going on, and not just even heat, but also very accurate, very precise heat as well. So if you want it to be at 1500 degrees, it will be at 1500 degrees, not 1530, not 1480. You'll get exactly what you're after. So it gives you a lot more control, and it does what I call taking the idiot factor out of it, which is me.
Right.
I don't have to guess, was that too hot, was that too cold? It is just exactly what you want it to be. The advantages of salt over using an open air kiln are several actually, and the first one is more precise heating, more accurate temperature control. Because your thermocouple is in the salt and it'll be right next to the blades that you're heating, you're going to only have a temperature variation of a degree or two versus what it says on the display, versus what your blade actually is. So your temperature will be just exactly what you want it to be. And that's very, very important. Secondly, the salt protects the blade from any scaling, oxidation, decarburization, anything that's going to mess with the surface of the steel. And because of that, you can go to very, very fine finishes on your steel before you heat treat the blade. This is a huge advantage in doing high tolerance work, but also in fancy things like engraving and things like that. You can do all your engraving before it's heat treated, and then it comes out just as clean as what it went in. Also, the salt protects the blade on its trip from the heating of the kiln to whatever you're going to quench it in. Whether that be water, oil, or air, the salt forms a very, very thin layer of protection on the steel, protecting it from the oxygen and therefore scale and decarburization. One of the things that the salt kilns do, the high temperature salt will fume, and it's pretty easy to see what's going on here with all the fumes coming out of the top. And that can be a problem if you're in an area with a lot of sensitive things that you're concerned about corrosion, because the salts are essentially sodium chloride. So you've got salt fumes coming up, and that's not a good thing, but it's very, very simple to take care of and to rectify. And what's in the fancy coffee mug here is known as Park Carbon, and it's just very finely powdered graphite. And what you do is you just sprinkle about 3/8 of an inch or so on the top of the salt, and it forms a barrier to the fuming, and yet allows you to still put your blades or anything else you want down in the salt. It also acts as an insulating layer on top of the salt as well, and that helps keep even temperature within inside the salt pot itself. So all you do is just take a little bit, whoop, and don't slip. You just take a little bit, and just sprinkle it on the top. Just form a light layer, and that's all there is to it. Okay, just like with any other piece of equipment, safety is extremely important. And since we are dealing with a liquid that is running in the neighborhood of 1500 degrees, you need to be extremely careful. One of the downside with salt systems, no matter how they're fired, is if any liquid gets in there, and with what we do with knife making, especially oil or grease, or even layout fluid, die-chem layout fluid, anything like that, leftover magic marker on a blade will cause the salt to pop and spatter. In a worst case scenario, once I dropped a pair of greasy vice grips down in the pot. That was a very, very bad thing, and by the time I had run 20 feet away, the whole pot exploded with salt, hit the ceiling, and I was still got minor burns on my back 20 feet away as I was running away. So, like with anything, you need to be very, very careful about safety. So, first, number one, never look directly down into the pot, because if something happens, all the splatters are going to be going up. Secondly, always wear safety equipment. We recommend a face shield, a full face shield, not just safety glasses. Heavy gloves, a long sleeve shirt is a good idea as well, just to protect you from any minor spatters or pops that may come out of the salt system. So always be thinking safety. It's very, very important, and although the salts are a great way to heat treat your stuff, it's certainly not worth getting hurt over. There are a number of ways to suspend your blade down in the salt. This is just a simple full-tang hunting knife, and a real handy way to suspend a blade like this in the salt is just using some 14 gauge galvanized electric fence wire. It's cheap, it's easy to get, and it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg when you're ready to throw it away either. But quite simply, what I would do with a blade like this is I just thread the wire through one of the holes, bend it over, wrap it around the tang, and then I'll cut off these two little extra pieces here, and then the blade will be suspended down in the salt next to the thermocouple, and I'll bend over the top of the wire to hang it on the side of the pot. As I said earlier, one of the advantages of the salt is very fast heating. Now you would think that that might shock the blade because it's so quick, putting it right down into a 1493 degree liquid. But what happens is when you put the cold blade in there, a layer of salt freezes on the blade instantly, and that actually acts as an insulating layer between the molten salt and the blade itself. So even though it's very, very quick, it doesn't shock the blade. So I thought I'd show you how that works quickly. See how there's a layer of salt on the blade just from dipping it in and out. And now what I'll do is I'll dip it in again, and you can see how quickly the blade starts to heat. So far for this demonstration, we've been using this full-tang hunting knife blade made of 01 tool steel. Because it's 01 tool steel, we've got the temperature set for 1490 degrees. And what will happen is we'll put the blade in the salt, and I've got the wire pre-bent to hang on the side of the pot. And what will happen is the temperature will drop down to 1475 or 1480 or so, and then slowly come back up to the set point of 1490. Once it's there for 01, I like to soak it for about 10 minutes. Now, your temperatures, your soak times, those sort of things will vary depending on what type of steel you're using in your knives. So for that, it's best to consult the steel manufacturer for recommended heat treating cycles for those particular steels. Okay, now that the blade's been in here for 10 minutes, we can pull it out and quench it in oil since it's an 01 blade. If it were an air hardening blade, we just pull it out and hang it up. Water hardening steel, of course, we'd pull it out and quench it in water or brine, depending on what we wanted to do with it. Now, depending on how you're quenching it, there's a number of things you can do. You can either just pull it out by the wire, and the wire's cool enough with heavy gloves you can just hold on to that. If you think you need more control over what's going on, you can pull it out by the wire and then grab it with tongs and hold it a little bit more securely as well. So there's a lot of options. And the third alternative would be is if you really want to control what's going on, you can actually use tongs with a locking ring when you put it down in there if you're only doing one blade at a time, and just stand there and wait while the blade comes to temperature as well. So you have a lot of options for how you want to keep the blade in the salt. But I find the most convenient is just to use the electric fence wire. So once again, before you pull things out or get close to being to the top of the pot, be sure you've got your gloves on and your safety visor down. And then we can just pull the blade out and see that it's all even and ready to quench from there. Here I'm taking way longer than I normally would, but I would grab the blade by the wire and bring it over and quench it in the oil.
That was an awesome presentation by Tim Zowada on the salt bath units. We really appreciate Tim, you showing up today, showing us how you do these things, explaining the whole process to everybody. If you have any questions or comments, give us a call, go online, see us on Instagram and Facebook, and enjoy your knife making endeavors. And if you're interested in a salt bath unit, look us up and enjoy. Thanks.